So, we are about to get a McLaren parade in a moment, and here it is. And I'm once again joined by Stephen Donnell and a Kiwi, my favourites. Got a big passion for everything Kiwi motorsport. I spent a lot of time down there doing the Toyota Racing Series. I'll be going back there in January. But let's talk about what is special. Amanda's out there, obviously. What have we got coming? We've got a whole bunch of different road cars from McLaren. Of course, that's a completely different aspect of McLaren, which I don't know if Bruce ever kind of envisioned that to be, but I'm pretty sure he probably did.
It's interesting that after he won the 1966 Le Mans with Chris Amon, he had a feeling that he could do well too. And when the Can-Am cars came out, the M6s, he knew he was onto something good. The thought of a road car never left his mind, and at the end of '69, he built his first road car, which was an M6B GT. The B being it was an M6B. Mm-hmm. It was a GT car. And he wanted to race it at Le Mans. And he was told he needed 5 prototypes, and he could do it. Unfortunately, being French, they changed their minds and said, no, you don't need 5 now, you need 50. So he sort of put it to one side and left it. And then, unfortunately, he passed away in June 1970. He was unable to carry it on any further. And the team didn't really have all the knowledge that Bruce had, because in those days, without computers, mobile phones, all those sorts of things, you weren't able to actually record all that information, and it was all in his head. Anyway, the years went by after that. But, by the way, it was the second supercar ever to be built. The first one was the Lamborghini Miura. And
Malukas, sorry, just want to pick you up. David Malukas is about to put, somebody's going to get the ride of a lifetime here. That's David Malukas, who is the current IndyCar McLaren driver, will be in 2024. And so whoever that passenger is, I didn't want to stop you in full flow, but I just wanted to interrupt you there and let our audience know that who that is. It's not just anybody driving that car, it is actually an IndyCar driver. Go ahead.
So, yeah, the Lamborghini Miura was the first, and the McLaren M6B GT was the second supercar to be built. Now, roll forward a number of years after that, and the Ron Dennis era with Gordon Murray, they designed the F1.
Yeah.
It was a car that no one had ever seen the like of before, and it was voted the supercar of the 20th century, and I think it was quite valid. Still today, when you see it there, and there's one here in the field, a red one, it's a remarkable car. And a lot of the technology that's in that car hasn't been met by a lot of other people who are still manufacturing cars. They haven't really caught up with it. Bearing in mind it's digital, so there's no computers in it at all. And it's not a turbo-powered engine, it's a standard engine.
Yeah, and I was around to see that come to fruition back when I was living in England, and there's no question that Ron Dennis spent a lot of time pushing that, as well as obviously running the Formula One team, but it was a passion of his too, and knowing that he had Gordon Murray on board, and that it was a passion of Gordon's, and it still is. I saw him just a couple of months ago with his latest car that he's come up with, but that particular thing, and also Ferrari were in the works of kind of basically telling the world that they were going to put F1 technology in some of their road cars. And so Gordon and Ron said, we can do that. And that's exactly what they did here. And like you say, it was streets ahead of its time, and kind of still is.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting that was the first production car ever to have a carbon fibre chassis. So as well as leading the field in F1 with carbon fibre tubs back in 1981, here we are with our road car. It took 4,000 man-hours to build one chassis.
What? That's insane. So,
it is.
Do you know how many they produced?
108.
God, that's incredible.
Yeah. And most of them are still out there, and they're running as either race cars or road cars. But it was designed as a road car. It wasn't designed as a race car, but the pressure from owners to race it came to the fore, and sort of thus Le Mans 1995.
You know,
fabulous results there.
Yeah, I talked to some of the McLaren drivers in the 650s, and I was living in Asia at the time, and McLaren started racing their road cars, as it were, or GT cars. And the one thing that they couldn't keep up with at the time is that everybody wanted to race them, but they weren't supplying enough parts to keep up with racing. It wasn't, it wasn't a part of the racing division at the time.
That's absolutely right. It was designed as a road car, so any parts had to be specially made for those cars. But phenomenal results there. But we moved on from there once that era finished, and we were getting our engines for Formula One from Mercedes, and they wanted to do a joint project with us. So the Mercedes-Benz SLR McLaren came to the fore.
Is this your friend?
Certainly is. Roger Ormisher.
Hello, sir.
Come on, Roger, jump in. Grab the mic. We're having a wee chat about these cars that are about to unleash themselves on the Sonoma Raceway, and we've got a few handy drivers as well, and some very probably scared to death passengers, or excited and elated passengers. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tell us.
The SLR.
Yep.
Was a compromise. So a lot of it was Mercedes, what they wanted, and a lot of it was McLaren, what they wanted.
That would be an interesting meeting of the minds, wouldn't it?
It was, and a lot of the compromises that McLaren went heavy about, and I guess Mercedes were the same. But McLaren built all those cars.
Yeah.
They were built in Woking at the factory there. So they're a very special car. Now, we talked about carbon fibre construction. The F1, 4,000 man-hours. These ones, 400 man-hours.
Okay.
Significant. Why is that car important? Because really it's the link. Building all those cars, the McLaren staff knew that they could design and build a car of their own design. And so the team that have been building those cars stuck together, and they went on, and that's where McLaren cars came about. Now, every one of the cars we build today is a supercar. We don't build any other models. They're all supercars. And the MP412C was the first one. And it's amazing, Amanda and I were here in 2011, and they had the first one on show here, a Supernova silver car here, and also just a plain carbon fibre tub so people could see the construction of the car. And it's sort of gone on from there. But we probably should talk about what's going on the track now.
That's all right.
The first car in line there
Yep.
has Amanda McLaren in the passenger seat, and it's being driven by Andy.
Ooh, I'm not sure.
Andy,
the VP of marketing.
Andy Thomas.
Sorry, Andy
Right,
Thomas.
yeah.
Roger
VP.
saves us.
Thanks, Roger. Andy Thomas, for the VP for marketing in the US.
Right.
And it's a great car. That car, some of you may recall it if you've seen some of the Elvis movies. If you saw Spin Out, you would have seen that car in the movie. That's the car, the same car, and it's up and running, and it's used at a number of classic events as well. The beautiful gold and white car is a real testament to what Bruce was doing. It was a McLaren Elva, and it's paved the way to McLaren actually taking on the brand, or taking over the brand Elva as well.
I believe it was the first car sold to a customer by Bruce, that actual car.
Yes.
So it was the first car he ever actually sold as a manufacturer to a member of the public.
Roger, let me bring you in here. Obviously, you're with McLaren yourself. Tell us your background or what you do within all of this.
Right. Well, I've been with McLaren 6 years now, which amazingly enough is half of the company's history as an automotive company, which I find rather interesting.
Which is actually saying something, because it feels like they've been doing this for like 50 years.
Exactly.
In terms of
Yeah.
supercars, as we were describing.
Exactly. So I'm in charge of public relations for McLaren in the Americas. So I deal with the media all day, which is
Great fun.
Great fun. Great fun.
But I know from McLaren being in Dallas and in New York, and I've sort of, crossed paths with doing Formula One, but the interest in McLaren is growing exponentially here in the US. In my opinion, anyway. Do you feel that?
Absolutely. In the 6 years I've been there, the brand has become more and more recognised, and I think Formula One has really helped that. But especially the Drive to Survive series on Netflix, where I live, nobody knew who McLaren was, literally. And I think they thought I sold baby strollers. I think that's
Yes.
what they think I was doing. So that was rather embarrassing, really. And they were a bit surprised
Beautiful
when
baby strollers, don't mind.
But when I turned up in a supercar, they suddenly got it. But most of them had no interest until it was COVID. Drive to Survive came on. They all watched it, and then suddenly the interest level has spiked exponentially for the brand in North America because of that series.
I know that we look back in history, there'll be kids in 40 years' time studying the pandemic era and what it meant to the world. Both bad and good, I may add, but there's a lot of good that came out of it, and that's just one example, but there are many of people doing different things that they wouldn't normally do and changing their whole lives around because they had time to think about it.
Yeah, and I think it's also a brand that people have warmed to in the US as well because it has a humanistic characteristic about it. It's still, we still feel like we work for Bruce McLaren.
Yeah.
Every day.
Yep.
When we go in, there's that spirit, that whole, it runs throughout the company, which I find amazing. It makes it such a wonderful company to work for, obviously. But although we're an exclusive company in terms of the product that we produce, we all want to be an inclusive company. So we want people to sit in the cars. We want people to experience them. We want people to get close to them. That's really the MO of what we do every day, is exposing the brand to a new generation and new customers and new enthusiasts. It doesn't matter. We just opened a brand experience center in the Wynn Las Vegas hotel. Yeah. And it's all about, we've had 20,000 people go through in the first 5 weeks. Literally, take a picture with the car, sit in a simulator, configure your own McLaren, get them close to the brand. They're not necessarily customers now, but who knows?
Yeah, and I remember back in the mid-90s when I was doing Formula One, and I got close to Ron and his wife in terms of being there every weekend. And, we talked quite a lot about the development of the road cars and just the challenge of getting over that Italian sort of mentality that you can't build supercars. Lamborghini and Ferrari and Alfa, they do the, they do the supercars. What do you do? What are you doing in this area? Stick to Formula One. That was the message that Ron got clearly.
Oh, that's interesting.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And not that they couldn't do it, and a one-off center here or whatever it might be was a nice thing, but they never thought that they would actually get in and start to be part of this market.
Which made it easier for us at the beginning because there was no attention on us. So I think necessarily when we came into the market, it was like, that would be a puff of smoke and gone.
Yes.
And I think as we established ourselves and then we started winning the comparison tests and winning lightning lap contests at Car and Driver, suddenly people started to take notice. They kind of give us a free ride, I think, for the first 4 or 5 years. And then suddenly when 720 came and Ferrari are pulling one apart in Maranello to try and figure out how we did it, you're being taken seriously.
Yeah,
and I think that was the biggest difference. But think back to the Garagistes, Enzo Ferrari and his view of Ken Tyrrell, and Bruce and everybody else who he dismissed as Garagistes. Yeah, there's always been an engineering thing in the UK where there was that spirit, that entrepreneurial, that maybe it was a backyard woodshed. Who cares? They could build a really cool car. I think the way it's taken off, yes, it's been absolutely amazing to see how people have embraced the sport in the last few years, and I think. There were characters in the sport, if you go back to the 70s and 80s, there were real characters in the sport, and then it kind of went away a bit, but now I think they're blossoming again, and there's so much of a difference between Lando and, say, Daniel Ricciardo. Totally different characters, but people warm to them, and again, they're warming to the McLaren team. I mean, when we had Dan Rick as part of the team, I think we were the most, they did that big fan survey about 18 months ago, and I think we were number 1 team, and Lando was number 1, and Danny Rick was number 3 or something in the popularity stakes. So, yeah, it's
Cisco and WebEx picked up on it and were doing national ads saying, let's do a poll on who's the most popular. And 2 companies that are involved currently with the Formula One team, but the tech company, I think there's a few catalysts. The tech companies obviously with the money, the new tobacco money as I call it, because it kind of, if you know Formula One, that makes sense because the real money is obviously coming from those companies. Drive to Survive, another catalyst. But I think the other thing is, with all due respect to the great Bernie Ecclestone, his approach to Formula One couldn't be more different than Liberty's, and the opening of social media stroke the world to Formula One and the access to Formula One that Bernie did never allow, I think, right or wrong, has changed it forever. And I think that's why we've got the fans the way they are, because they have access to the drivers, and the drivers have instant access to them. I think, I don't know, would you reckon Bruce would have embraced social media? I think he would, if he'd have been around in this area.
Well, he was very innovative himself with his car design and all those sorts of things. So it wouldn't surprise me, if his brain was ticking over and thinking, let's do this, let's get the name out there.
Yeah, and he was a businessman to boot, just as Ron Dennis was. I think whatever tool you can use to grow your gravitas, you've got 10 teams you're fighting against, possibly 11th. You do whatever it takes. And I've been around Formula One a long time and know just how hard working in PR and trying to get your team to be noted or notarized and more popular than the other, and especially up against Max Verstappen and the Dutch Orange Army, cannot be an easy time.
No, but I think it's the genuineness of those drivers. You talk about Lando, and now Oscar. So they're really genuine people. They're down to earth. They're relatable. you know, they could be your next door neighbour, effectively. They're not some, like we were talking about musicians, right? They're not these global superstars. They just see themselves as racing drivers that want to win races. They don't see themselves as celebrities, which I think means people can interact with them a lot easier. I think they can relate to them a lot easier, and that's why they've attracted this huge following, because they're relatable.
Yeah, and I also think that in my era of 30 years of following these sorts of motor racing, to take the helmets off and to see them as humans rather than these sort of spaceman stroke, fighter pilots, which they are too, because not many of them can do what they do, and certainly I can't, and most normal people can't. So that's why we idolize them in that way. But to see them take their helmets off and realize they have a bad day at the office, or they're having a rotten time, or they're miffed that their car wasn't working, or they broke down and they're not very happy about it, just means they're human, and then suddenly they're more relatable immediately, I think. Tell us more about the cars out here, Stephen, because we've got some fantastic cars and we're watching this parade, but we were just taken aside there by the amazing adoration, really, of the fans that have come to see this.
There's a wide variety of cars there, selected from many of the cars that have been shipped, and the models that have been shipped to the US over the last 13 years, I guess it is now. And you probably see the big flashy ones, the red and white one, and some other coloured ones with great big wings on them and all sorts of things. That's the McLaren Senna, which was specially done, and there's one on screen just gone out of sight.
That was that blue and white.
The white and blue one there, and there's a number of them coming around. They are absolutely amazing cars.
I don't know if I spoke out of turn, but am I right in saying that to a certain extent Senna had a bit of an input on the Senna car, or at least wanted to?
Bruno Senna.
Yeah, well, that's
nephew.
a different story, yes.
He was involved right through. The family was involved right through
that.
too, and Bruno did a lot of test driving for that car.
Okay.
So
now, that was before he raced for Williams, or?
No, it was after.
Okay.
He's now a brand ambassador for McLaren.
Perfect.
As well. So there's that connection with the Senna family, and it's a wonderful thing to have the family and the foundation that the Senna family run in Brazil for educating the Brazilian children is a phenomenal exercise that they've been working through for many years, and it's all starting to come to fruition with some big numbers of children and teachers and reading material and teaching material that has been sent to schools and other educational institutions in Brazil. It's a fantastic scheme.
Well, I know, knowing Bruno, what a tinker he is for all things technical, as well as being a fantastic racing driver, I may add. I remember him doing Formula 3 at Macau the first time I met him, and I looked into those eyes and I was like, oh my gosh, it was almost like eerie, because those were those same dull kind of focused eyes that Ayrton always showed, and you could tell he was definitely a part of that family, and his ability in a car, second to none. But also he was all into electronics and gadgets and gizmos, and now he's doing what he's doing. He's doing what do you call it? The drone flying, the drone series, and a big part of developing that too. So it wouldn't surprise me when you tell me that he had an input into the car, because I'm sure that would be right up his alley.
You'll also notice that out there is a bright green car which has no windscreen and no roof, no nothing. And it's called a McLaren Alva. Now, Alva was a company originally known as Trojan that Bruce was involved with, who made all the customer cars for McLaren. So
here in the States,
McLaren made all the team cars. He didn't realise, but as a result of Can-Am over here, the market for customer cars became a big thing. And so he couldn't afford it, he didn't have the time to do it, so he entered into an engagement with Trojan, and they built all the customer cars for them.
And that Elva name, of course, has become synonymous with historic racing here in the US, and so it's a name that we know very well here, and because of that, and because of Bruce.
Well, McLaren now own that name, and so that's why we've been able to call that car the McLaren Elva. It's just gone past just now up there.
Interesting.
So some amazing cars out there. People often wonder about the terminology where we talk about a 765 LT. What does the LT mean? So I'll let Roger explain that, because I've done quite a bit of talking.
Right, no, it stands for Longtail. So if you go back to the original racing cars, the Longtails were the ones that we raced at Le Mans.
Yes.
In modern terminology, in the McLaren range, a Longtail it's really the stripped out version of a car. So a 765 Longtail is a 720 with up power, basically a stripped out car. You'll take at least £100 out of the car, if not more, 150 to 200 in some of them, to make them exceptionally light. I mean, even down to engineering a tyre cap that's a gram less to get the weight out of the car. So it really is a challenge for the engineers to see already a very lightweight car. How can you take another couple of £100 out of it to make the Longtail version? So those are the special ones, and they're always limited as well. So yeah. No, it's definitely a part of our heritage is Longtail, and those cars are very sought after by customers.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, as we look at this parade of both historical and supercars, I don't know. I'll throw it both at you. What do you think? I mean, we're trying to get into Bruce's head because he's not here anymore, sadly. Obviously, we've spoken about Ron Dennis and Zach Brown, but what of the future? What next in this form of road cars? Do you think McLaren will do, or will they just follow on, as many of the supercar companies have done, which is just develop from the latest, and then you mentioned the Longtail, that's just another version in some ways. What next?
Well, I think we've done a lot of listening to our customers.
Okay.
And what they want, and you'll find that looking at the cars out there, they all look pretty good on the road, but they all have different characteristics, because a lot of the cars are road focused with trackability, but a lot of them too are track focused with road going capabilities.
Yeah.
So there's a blend. There's also the GT car, which is a great touring car, but it's still a supercar.
Yep.
And it all has all those characteristics as well. So depending on what people want, there's an everyday driver there, or there's some which are solely track focused, and that's it. So the Solus, which has just come out, which was in response to a lot of requests from people who'd played the PlayStation game and seen the car on there and said, well, it's on there, why can't you build it?
Yeah.
So
great.
McLaren had the opportunity to bring fantasy into reality, and they built 25 of those models, all pre-sold.
Wow, that's a good story, and one I didn't know. That's really good.
The first one was unveiled at Quail this year down at Pebble Beach.
Yeah, Pebble Beach.
Pretty amazing.
And Roger, what are your thoughts?
I think one way we're going to go is hybridization. So we just introduced with the McLaren Artura our first high-performance hybrid car. Now we've done hybrids in what we call the hypercars. So the P1 and the Speedtail are hybrids. The Artura is our first series hybrid car, so built in numbers beyond the 200-300 that you build on a hypercar. It's fascinating because every bit of that car, 95% plus, is absolutely brand new. So from the MP412C, everything's been an evolution. Artura is the start of the second decade in McLaren's history because it's all new. So you've got a brand new carbon fiber tub, specially designed. We always used to engineer and design our tubs, but we had them built by an outside supplier. We now have our own facility in England where we build our own tubs, so we will lead the world in carbon fiber technology in road cars. And the Artura is the first iteration of that. But also in terms of brand new V6 engine, twin turbo V6 engine, it's got a 94 horsepower electric motor in it. It's got totally new electrical architecture. It's a moonshot for us, honestly. That's the way we look at Artura. We've really pushed the boundaries like any racing team would. We didn't go for simple. When we did the media launch, one of the journalists got out of it at the lunch stop and he said, Roger, he said, not even Toyota would attempt to do this in one car at once. It's crazy. Yeah. Because it's all new. You either do a new engine, or you do a new gearbox, or you do a new electrical architecture. You don't put them all in one car.
But but that's the philosophy that is ingrained, if you like, at Woking, because you're making Formula One cars, and that's bog standard for a week. I mean, McLaren's year this year epitomizes exactly that. They've had to change that car. Zach and his team, Lando included, have had to go from a car that they all admitted was not competitive to a point where Lando is now second place every other week, and boy, if he's not first place at Vegas this weekend, because there's no reason why he can't be, because that's where you guys have come in less than a year. It's fun. I think the 2023 season is going to go down not in McLaren's history as some of the greats where you win 15 and 16 races, but one of the amazing turnaround years, which brings you back into the relevance that McLaren fans expect of you.
Absolutely. And I think when you look at how the year has gone, the work and effort that has gone into it, the technology, it's still the same people building the cars.
Yeah.
But there's been a whole change in focus in the way in which they go about designing the cars and the parts that they're putting on the cars. And Amanda and I have just spent 2.5 months in the UK working with spending time with automotive and with the racing team there, and just to see the work ethics of the people who are building those cars and designing those cars and meeting a lot of those people for the first time. It's unbelievable what they've achieved, and they are just so excited about what the future holds for McLaren in Formula One, because they're certainly racing ahead. Talking about technology, one of the things about McLaren is that we are always chasing the cutting edge in technology. So all our cars, you know, competitors try and copy what we've done, but they're not where we're at, because we've already moved on from the next stage. And
moving target.
When you're putting the sort of technology into the cars we've got, customers love that, and they're excited to be part of the trip that we're going on with those cars. And they're sort of saying, well, you know, you've done this time, what are you going to do next? Yeah. And it's exciting for them, and it's exciting for us too, just to see what does come out.
Great words. And guys, I could talk to you guys all day. Please come back tomorrow when we do the parade again. It's been fascinating talking about McLaren, its history, its future, and its present. Thank you for being here. Thank you for bringing this amazing array of cars and history to this American event. It's truly an honor to have both a Kiwi and a Brit. That's the essence of McLaren.